Hello, hello, hello. A few people in the chat, even though it's an unusual time. It's nice to see. Sorry for that. Just don't have time tonight, and I didn't want to skip it again. Hey Don, good for you for getting rid of the so-called community application called Twitter. I mean, for now, I'll probably be back. It always gets you back, but it's been nice. First live chat as usual in Australia for these streams, and watch afterwards. I mean, that's one of the benefits of not being the usual time. Love to see a few new faces. Love to have you guys. Audio good? Nice. That is very good. Long and strong. I mean, yeah, I bought a while ago, and it went down and it went up. It's going great. I cannot complain too much. Hope vacation from the mob is going well. Yeah, I mean, it's not that bad. It's just sometimes you gotta detox, especially I think right now with Twitter just being about Palestine and Israel the entire time, and you see like dead people all the time. Like, it's just not something I wanna have, right? Like, I know it's tragic, I know it's horrendous what's going on, but I just don't want to see dead people in my day-to-day life, right? Like, I think that just kind of does something with you that is not good. Like, people that grew up on the internet have obviously seen terrible things, but I don't think that's something that you should be watching daily. So, yeah. But yeah, that's that. So I've been enjoying it. Today is gonna be a little bit scuffed. It's earlier than usual, and I've not eaten yet. I mean, I had breakfast, but that's pretty much it. Because the little baby has decided that today of all days is the day where she is complaining. So she's been not happy. And the only way to stop her from being unhappy has been carrying her around, which I've been doing. But that means early stream and me not being fully there because I've not had enough food. But we'll manage. And once the stream is done, I'll go get some food. So fasting is good for body, bro. Yeah, but not for your mind. Especially not when you're like freshly hungry. I mean, after a few days it gets better, but you don't want to do your day-to-day life hungry. But yeah. Bullish fasting, let's go. I mean, it's signs of the bear market. Duck isn't getting any food. Anyway, before we start the show, shout out to Woo for sponsoring it. Really appreciate their support. They've been amazing to work with. Go check them out. Their links are in the description. And yeah, let's get into it. No more small talk, just real talk. And the real talk, I mean, we'll be as objective as possible. I do have a position, as in I'm betting on upside, but obviously there's pros and cons to the market right now, or upsides and downsides, whatever. As the title suggests, there's a few arguments you can make. I think some of them are better than others, so we'll talk about all of that if I can manage to, because like I said, fighting through hunger. Like, I'm starving here. Also been getting back into sports, so it's like my food intake has doubled, which means if I don't eat, I'm dead. But yeah, excuses. So yeah, high time frame, monthly hasn't changed. That said, I think if we close above this resistance, that's looking really good. So 29.1k is the line in the sand. I don't think this is like necessarily like a resistance that you want to be bearish in. It was just, I mean, I didn't like it as support. If you remember, a few months back, I was like, yeah, we broke above this, but we didn't move far enough away from it for me to consider it support. You saw how it closed at the upper boundary, where a lot of people would say, hey, this is perfect support retest. And then it just broke through. And in my opinion, that was the reason why. When you get these kind of breakouts and they don't move a single bit, it's not the best, right? And then it's the same here with the breakdown, right? It's the same argument. You had a breakdown, you had a bearish retest. You could argue, hey, this should go down. Instead, it went up, and quite a bit. Now, obviously, the 30K candle. That's a little bit based on false fake news, whatever. If I say fake news, it just seems wrong, but it was literally fake news. So, I mean, it's just is what it is. But yeah, so I didn't like it as support. I don't like it as resistance. It's just the only real thing that we have in this area. So I have it on the chart, but it's not necessarily a strong kind of indication where the market's going to go. And then on the weekly time frame, I have this zone mapped out. And if you remember back, we closed out resistance and I was like, yes, we did. But we also managed to go above the bottom of that cluster, which is a good sign. And we've tested that resistance before. So I was like, okay, I could see this break through. Now we got a pullback before into that support down here. So whenever I draw these lines, right, and these boxes, how they work is, and I've seen a lot of people kind of argue my boxes are too big, whatever. It's not really how it works. So basically there's two important areas in that box, and it's the top and the bottom one. And it just means basically the reason why it's an area and not lines is because basically the first time you test it, we can get rejected anywhere in there, and it's something that you see here. So like it's a resistance, but then once you close inside of it, the bottom turns into support and top turns into like stays resistance, right? So that's kind of what we did. Basically, we hit the top part of the box, got rejected, ran into the bottom part, and bounced. And so far so good, right? Now we're in this situation where we are at resistance, still resistance, right? 28K. But we've tested it a bunch of times now. And I think all these people, like with the head and shoulders, they're all meme people. I don't believe in it. I think the fact that we got this far is a pretty good, sign. And if you think like we're going to go to 30K and then back down again to complete the head and shoulders, I think that's not going to happen. If you get to 30K, I think we're going to go higher. So the only real place where you can be bearish, right? And this is something I said the first time we tested 28K is 28K, because that's the only real level we have. And your argument would basically be, for context, this pump on the daily, right? This massive wick to the upside was caused, and I mean, I'm guessing everyone knows, but I just want to say it for completeness sake. That was caused by a news outlet that shall not be named, basically saying the ETF was approved, which was not true. They just basically heard a rumor and put that out there, as far as I understood it. And that caused the market to rally quite a bit. Now, it already rallied before, right? So we already had this rally here. And then we just had that one big candle. And that was based on that news. So that just kind of skews the chart a little bit, makes it look a little bit weird. I've seen a lot of people argue that a long wick is bearish. That's not how it works, in my opinion. So my kind of stance on that whole story is basically that we got ETF news and the market immediately ran like crazy, because I think a bunch of people were, one, poorly positioned, and two, I mean, in general, poorly positioned describes it quite well, because people were shorting and also people didn't have Bitcoin even though they like it, right? I think there's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines that like Bitcoin but don't feel like the market is there. They're like, our market should be bearish, the S&P should be bearish, whatever. And so they don't own Bitcoin, and then the news kind of blindsided everyone and that pushed price up. Now, for me, that's a good sign, right? Like if we got that news and people believed it and the market didn't move, I'd be worried. But the fact that we got this massive of a move just means, to me anyway, that there's a bunch of people on the sidelines or in bad positions that, that can kind of fuel the fire, so to speak. Like you have a bunch of people on the wrong side of the market. And yeah, we got a reaction, and I think that's basically, if we get an ETF approval, whatever, that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, right? It's probably going to act the same way, unless we get a massive front run, right? So as in, if this market goes like this, then pops, and then you get the ETF news, I could see us pop a little bit and then retrace quite a bit of it, because then it's going to be sell the news event. But with the market being this depressed and this ready for good news, I think we're going to get a similar candle, just for longer and stronger. So it just basically means, when are we going to get an ETF? Are we getting an ETF? And I think the chances to get one pretty high. When is actually like very likely pretty soon. So that combination just kind of means that it's likely that people that saw this pump, right? Like if you see something like this and you don't have a position, right? What are you thinking? You're like, fuck. Like you see the news, you're like, oh shit. And then you see the pump, you're like, I'm completely mispositioned, right? And it being a fake kind of pump makes you be able to actually get your position that you wanted to, right? Because a bunch of people, at least the smarter ones, will realize that they're just mispositioned. Like, let's put it that way. Like, if you're bullish, right? Because there's a lot of people that are bullish crypto that don't own this thing because they're like, macro is bad, this is bad, blah, 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 right? But I think they got scared out of their mind, thinking that they're gonna miss the pump, miss the run. And I think they're very likely using this candle as kind of like a candle to see in the future, kind of to see what to expect, and what is to expect from this kind of candle is upside, right? So they're basically rushing to position, and I think we're gonna get a little bit of positive price action. And today has been a day of such. You might not think that way because you look on the daily time frame and it's actually not really been moving, but the S&P has been quite shit today, and Bitcoin has been absorbing a lot of it. So I think there's a bunch of people basically on the sidelines that got their eyes opened on how poorly they are positioned. There's a bunch of bears basically shorting because there's a big wick, not realizing why there is a big wick. I think that kind of opens the door for some good price action, which is why I think 28K support, not resistance, to kind of throw it back to the title. But obviously it's still both, really. But I think the resistance is going to break. That's kind of my view, unless the S&P just giga nukes, right? At that point, all bets are off. But yeah, I like the setup, and I like how basically we got to see the future. And it's bright, so it's good kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of my view on this on the weekly time frame. We are at resistance, but we've tested it a bunch of times. The news catalyst, people think is bearish. It's actually not as bearish as it is. Now the counter argument, right? And I said I was gonna be a little bit. I would try to be impartial, is that you could say like, hey, this was a fraud pump and it's going to open the eyes of the SEC that this is a fraudulent market. But let's be real, like they already think that way. It's not really like you have to convince the SEC that it's a fraudulent market. They really already think so. So if anything, you'd have to go to the courts. But then what is your argument, right? You're like, hey, this ETF thing is moving the market a bunch. Well, I mean, that's not really that great of an argument, because it's just a big news event. It's not like, yeah. So just get it out of the way and then people cannot abuse it anymore. Anyway, it's still all hinging on the SEC, on the ETF. Obviously, if that is denied, we're going to get an epic dump candle, especially given from smart people I've talked to like TradFi analysts, to pretty much everyone. Pretty much like literally like all the people I've talked to are kind of in agreement that we're going to get the ETF. So that means if we get a denial, that's going to shock everyone, and then we're going to get a massive, massive nuke. But it also means that a bunch of really smart people and me think that we're going to get it. So it's more likely that it's actually just going to happen. So, and if we do get it, I think there's people still are poorly positioned for it, which is quite a shocker, right? Because we all know that, like, at least like a lot of us know that it's very likely to come in the next like 3 months ish. And you got a candle of like this proportion. Like if you're poorly positioned for that with this much of a tell, and you know like what happens if there is one, I don't know. Just seems surprising to me. So I think a lot of the upside is gonna get priced in this and next month. So I think upside unless the S&P nukes, which is always possible, right? But if the S&P holds steady, I think we're gonna crawl up and then go up. We simply observe the closes, and the daily is still closing above 28K, so we are bullish until proven otherwise. Yes, it's also one good way to look at it. But yeah, that's the weekly time frame. It's interesting. It's at resistance. It hit resistance pretty neatly. But this is also one of the things where, like, these bearish retests don't amount for shit, in my opinion. Like, if you're bearish, if the market is bearish, it should front run the resistances and sell off. And this was a perfect kind of example. Like this looked kind of shit, right? We closed to below daily, below the daily levels. We didn't hold the breakout, retraced the entire candle. So that wasn't great, but the weekly pulled through, right? And I was like, I'm just gonna wait for the weekly time frame. I like the daily before, but I was like, we still have this support left, and I really don't feel like selling, and that proved to be a good move. And I think in general, if we were bearish, this should have broken down in here. It didn't, so I think there's there's a bunch of good reasons to be bullish. One of them being that we're basically like, we made a low here, a higher low here, higher low here, kind of rounding out here. It's not the worst chart in the world. Obviously could be better, but I mean, technically speaking, this wasn't even a deep pullback. Neither was this. So, yeah. If it gets approved, where does it go to? It depends a little bit on the global markets, but I think, and I mean, this might sound like a little bit stupid, right? But I think we could go to 60K. Obviously, that's like in like a while, but I think 60K is a reasonable target if we get the ETF. Now, obviously not short term, but that's kind of like where I think like this could go to. Like I think between 60 and 100K is the upper end. And then obviously if all markets are shit, we're not going to get even close. But the thing is, right, we're at this price point right now. Where we have to make a decision. And I think people just underestimate this. Like I see that kind of, it's basically volatility is still pretty cheap, but people underestimate like at what kind of important price point we are right now. So basically, this is a bearish retest here, right, from the range that we had here. Now, if we break down, that's hilariously bearish, right? Like that's just very, very shit. And then, I mean, there's an easy kind of road towards 20K. Now, if we break up, the bearish retest is invalidated and you have to be giga bullish, right? And where the fuck are you gonna, like, if you reclaim a range, what do you target, right? You have a range. And this is not me being like crazy, whatever. I'm not really like a believer in any of this crypto stuff. Like I don't care. But if you have a range and you break it down, right? Especially if it's a long-term range. If you come back in the range, and this is basically what we're going to be dealing with right now. Like if this goes up a little bit further towards 35, 36, like you can be bearish at 35, 36, fair enough, whatever. I don't really believe in it because we really should be rejecting here like we're doing right now, basically. as in like 28 to 30K, this current price action needs to be bearish. If you come back towards 36K, the entire price action is likely not bearish because you went too high. But if you come back into that range, like where do you target? You target the upper point of the range, right? And just because this is a high time frame range doesn't mean that that's going to be traded any differently. And that means if we reclaim like 33, 34, my target has to be 60. So yeah, I mean, that's like a possibility. It's not a given. Nothing is a given in any market, but that's going to be my target. If we reclaim, like if this breaks out now or in the next few days to weeks, my target's going to be 60K. And people were laughing at me when I was like, basically, and if you go back through the streams, right, when we were trading at 16K, I was like, I'm going to buy and I target 60K, and people were laughing, right? But this is basically exactly how I wanted it to go. Basically, you go back towards the range, you get rejected or not, and then like if that plays out bullishly, you come back in the upper range, and that's why I had this target, because like my first target was 30K and that hit. I was pretty perfect. That's why I kind of sold. But in general, my target was up here, because I was like, if you can reclaim the range, that's just generally likely. And we're kind of in this situation now where we got rejected. We're testing the same area for the third time now. So if the entire market doesn't just disappear, and like I said, that's still possible. If the S&P goes to zero, none of this is going to play out. But yeah, if it doesn't, this market is positioned quite well for upside. Why would you blindly buy 20K? Because it seems cheap to me. I don't think we're gonna, like, it took basically the biggest exchanges and all hedge funds and whatever funds and all the big names in crypto to be liquidated at 16K, or at like 20K to take us to 16. Unless you think Binance is gonna go down, I don't think there's any way we manage to get back to 16K. Like if Binance goes down, like fair enough, then you get to buy like 12. I think that's gonna be the Pico bottom. Doesn't go any lower than that. But if Binance doesn't go down, I don't think we manage to get to 16K. I think 20K is kind of crazy low at that point already. Hey Don, will $1 of X subscription destroy your finances? I'm actually subscribed to Twitter anyway, so I pay more than that per month. But the answer to that question is still yes. Do you follow the 4-year cycle, Don? Normally we get another dip. No, I think it's all memes. It works until it doesn't. And you can draw, it's very easy to draw like these kind of like, oh, this is how it used to play out, so now it's going to play out the same way, but usually it just doesn't. It's always different. Like you cannot really predict that FTX is going to blow up on a 4-year cycle, and that's obviously going to impact pricing. And you cannot guess how the SEC is going to treat crypto or whatever. I think just blanket comparing stuff just doesn't make much sense, especially if the price is so different. If it was this kind of market, yes. Like for example, if you look at Doge BTC, right? This kind of market, you can just be, I mean, if it does X, it's probably going to do this now. Like this makes sense. But if you now try to do the same thing again after it's moved up this much, it doesn't work anymore. Not spamming, but in case you missed it, are you considering this as a walk up on the weekly since early September? Somewhat, yeah. I mean, we talked about this, right, when it was happening. Like we had this walk down into pop, into red candle, and I very vividly remember being like on stream, being like, this is something that this is something I love to see. And it is kind of doing that. So yeah, not hating. It's not necessarily the walk-ups that I like. They look a little bit different, but it's not bad. Do you eat steaks every day, Don? No, I don't eat steaks at all. I'm a European. We don't really eat steaks that much. And I'm a duck on top. Ducks don't eat steak. How does Bitcoin Cash look in your opinion? I mean, in general, altcoins look like shit, but Bitcoin Cash still looks great in comparison to all the other altcoins. To be quite honest, like that's just a good looking chart. The other altcoins, not so much. We can talk about them in a bit. What I don't really understand is almost everyone expects that the ETF gets approved. Why will it not be a sell the news event? I mean, you saw people are still like people expect it, but still mispositioned. I mean, you got this kind of candle, and also it's just a strong fundamental kind of shift in narrative. If you get an ETF, that's kind of like a go ahead sign. I know it's not really, but it's a little bit of a go ahead sign from the US government, right? Which just gives this entire space a little bit more legitimacy, and the boomers a little bit more of balls to get into this, and it's going to be all over the news. People don't like what you don't realize, right? Like you're talking about everyone, and like everyone knows that we're going to get the ETF. I can guarantee you that like crypto is quite small right now. Like people don't really care. And I would say like almost no one actually knows that this is even a discussion. It's just the people in crypto, active in crypto know. And then it feels like everyone, because that's everyone that we interact with, but it's not how it is, right? Your family, your friends, if you didn't tell them, and if they're not really involved, they don't know. And the people on the street, they don't know. Even if they dabbled in crypto, they don't know. The boomers don't know. Like there's a bunch of people that don't know that will know. 10 people trading, yeah. It's like literally this is a ghost town right now. So you might think like, hey, this is a sell the news event because everyone knows. Well, I mean, you have information from an industry that you're very, very close to that other people don't have. So, yeah. Hi Don, could you please explain how you risk manage your position from 16K to 30K? How do you calculate your risk? Thank you for your hard work. I mean, how I risk managed it was basically, and this is something that I always do. So I bought 16K and I kind of had like an invalidation at like 14, like any close below 14, I would have been out. So that was my initial kind of risk management. Probably, I mean, in general, like this was a spot trade. So like I generally only trade spot, so it's a little bit easier. So if something goes horribly wrong, like for example, if I buy at like 25, and I'm like convinced that crypto should be more expensive or like that Bitcoin should go up and it dumps to 20K, I bought spot. Like it's not like anyone can force me to sell. Like I can just hold, be like, I'm an investor, always been an investor. It's quite nice. I would not say that's the best way to trade, but for some reason, like it just kind of makes it easier for me to actually stick to like higher time frame conviction. But basically, like I have like a rough invalidation and price moved up. And then the first time you get a pullback, like a significant one, that's usually the area where like, so basically when you got this pullback, I actually sold into here. Like a little bit, but even if I didn't, right, like if it pulls back and then bounces, and this is not really pullback, right? When you get like this kind of tiny pullback after a massive rally, what people usually do is they move their stop loss up to that low, and that's something that I think is not necessarily the wisest choice, because then oftentimes you just get fucked. So I was like, okay, my invalidation is down here now. So basically we moved up and I was like, 14K is not my invalidation anymore. If it gets back anywhere close to this, then I'm going to be wrong. And then the further it moved up, at some point I was like, okay, we kind of like this is the range low, 18K, 18K. I wouldn't want to necessarily see like a couple of closes below there, like a little bit of like 1 or 2 or 3, whatever, but I wouldn't want to see this kind of go here and then do this and then start drooping. And at that point, I would have been out. And then it moved higher, right? Like I rebought actually here because of basically we had this massive dump because people were like, oh, Tether's... I know USDC was at that point. USDC is fucked, whatever. Bought a bunch there. It moved higher. And at that point, like when we moved higher than the highs before, I was just kind of like, okay, if we go back below to 20K, then I'm going to be wrong. It went to 30. I sold again. It dumped. I was like, okay, this is going to go low. But then we got DTF news, basically. Rallied off of that. I bought back here. Didn't get anywhere close to the low. It rallied. I sold. So I just trade around it a little bit. But even if I didn't, like, if I didn't sell at all, at this point, I would have probably just in general, because now, like, I would have traded around this position because now I really like 20K as support, and that would have been in the validation previously. So that means I kind of have to take profits, because if where I want to buy is kind of my stop, I'm kind of fucked. But yeah, it's, I mean, I don't know, my trading has turned from very systematic and very like, these are the rules, to just basically going from, I mean, this is how the market works, this is how it should do. If it doesn't do that, I'm going to be out. So like it went from very strict, okay, there's a low, there's a high. If it does this and that, then I have to do this and that, to, okay, this is the market and this is how it's supposed to act in these kind of circumstances. And if it doesn't act like this and that, I don't like it. I like this new version of my trading style better. That's why I have it now. But I don't think you can go from not trading to that style from the get-go. I think you kind of have to go through this process of going strict at it and then getting less and less strict. But still, obviously, like, you don't want to risk your entire... Like, you don't want to be like, oh, I have to be right, because you're going to be wrong all the time. Like, I'm wrong from time to time. I've been wrong before. And you don't want to be wiped out by that, obviously. So you still have to have invalidations. You still have to have all of that. And that's why it's important that you go the strict route, because you need to know that if you do something wrong and then, like, you get something wrong and then you just stick with it because you're just like, I have to be right, then you will be losing everything. But you also have to understand that the market isn't just like, okay, there's a low, there's a high, and that's it. Like, I think if you just use TA, you kind of reach the ceiling at some point. And I think there's much more to trading markets than just TA. And I mean, technically a lot of the stuff that I described is still TA, but just different from the traditional way of looking at the market. Like, you just figure out what the market should and shouldn't do in certain circumstances, and how it should act around news and should act around like certain price action and volumes and whatever, and how it does. And then you just figure out where to go from there. Reading between the lines. Yeah, exactly. I like it. That's a good one. Props to that. Exactly right. But I mean, it's very hard to explain, and it might not make any sense. And the strict style always works, so maybe go with that. If Bitcoin goes to 60K, what price do you expect for altcoins? For example, Sol, does it go 2x or more or less? So Sol, I don't know. Sol is a little bit of a stronger outlier. So maybe Sol actually pulls through. The other altcoins, I think, barely move. I think, and this is something you can talk about now, like if Bitcoin goes to 60K, I could see ETH not even breaching 2.1. Maybe like 2.5, but yeah, I think altcoins would underperform in that world massively, especially if it's an ETF driven pump. That said, like if you really get bullish, right? And I don't want to be like super like that's the dumb thing. Like if I'm like I like 60K as the next breakout point, but we still need to break out first, right? And then people are gonna come to me and they're like, oh, but 28K rejected us, whatever, and you said 60K, you're so hilariously wrong. I mean, it's just high time frame. You look at this thing, I'm like, I have a trade going technically. I mean, I traded around it, but technically I have a trade going from 16K. And I'm like, if this resistance fails, where we are, this is the next one, right? But I think if that happens, right, if you kind of walk up here and then pump, obviously not going to look like that, but whatever, just for explanatory sense, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. I think the altcoin ratios are going to suffer. And something that you've been seeing, just look at this. ETH's been completely getting crushed, even though Bitcoin's been going up. I mean, just look at that. This is ETH, BTC. Yeah. This is Bitcoin. Now, one thing that you're going to see is that, look here. So when Bitcoin was bottoming in here, and I mean, we can just start doing this. So this is where Bitcoin bottomed, around here. Let's just do this on the daily time frame, it's easier. So this is where Bitcoin bottomed-ish. And then ETH bounced. Bitcoin walked up, down a little. You can even be like more specific and say, okay, Bitcoin bottomed here. That's the peak or bottom of Bitcoin. What do you see? So Bitcoin bottomed and walked up. And we've kind of been just doing the inverse, right? So you can see how ETH BTC has been struggling since Bitcoin's bottomed. And I think that would continue. Yeah, low here on Bitcoin, that nuked ETH BTC. ETH BTC kept nuking, had this little dumb ETH futures pump, ETH ETF futures, whatever. So dumb. We talked about it. I got so much shit for being bearish this, and it's been dumping ever since. And I think that's going to get worse if Bitcoin goes up. Like, you're going to see ETH BTC just completely crater. So I'm expecting less, but at the end of it, like maybe at like 40, 50, 60K, I will, like, there's probably going to be rotations. So the higher Bitcoin goes, the more potential these altcoins have, but also the more short-term pressure they're going to get under. Like, the bigger the Bitcoin move, the worse it is going to be for altcoins, in my opinion. And not in USD terms, you're going to be happy. It's probably going to go up, but not that much. I really don't like ETH. The look of this is horrendous. And I'm saying this while it's trading just barely below support, which is usually areas where I like to like look at buys. But I don't like this. It's still too slow. It's still walking down. I'm not the biggest fan. Like, this looks like it wants to do this, and then this, and then this, and then come up. That's how ETH looks like to me. And that's not something I want to buy. Do you spend a lot of money on food? No, I don't think so. Like, we barely eat out. My fiance is a great cook, and a great, like, she's great in like baking too. So I like her food better than most of the stuff you get outside. So that's generally just cheap. I mean, I don't look at the prices in the supermarket, if that's what you're asking. But I also don't go to, like, I mean, I don't know, like, you have premium stores in the US, I think. I don't really care. So. Your buys are always more easy to understand than your sells, but you always manage to sell the Pico top right in time. Yeah, my sells are mostly focused on things that are not necessarily TA. My buys are more so. So it just, like, if you look at it from like a sentiment kind of view, or just in general, then it's more understandable why I sold than it is from just necessarily looking at TA. But yeah, I am not the biggest fan of the ETH look. That looks like shit. And it's actually quite impressive if you compare, like, look at Bitcoin, right? The last few days. So that's been like a nice, like, you had a range somewhat. And you have a range breakout. And then now you look at ETH/USD. What the fuck is that? Like that looks bearish. Like this, like how is ETH/USD making new lows while Bitcoin is breaking highs? Like that's just a really, really bad sign for ETH. Now obviously it's a little bit higher than that one, but still, like the direction is pretty clear. Even when Bitcoin like puts in like massive candles, ETH struggling. I mean, even like on good days, and I've seen a bunch of people talk about like, and this is something like where I'm like a little bit confused, like in chat rooms and stuff, people are like, they're doing like the whole look at ETH and an eye emoji, whatever. Look at this. The fuck are you actually talking about? Like I can barely see the green candles. Like you go on the 4 hour, this is literally, the chart does this, and then it goes like this. Not even. It does this, and then it does this, and people are excited. And until that stops, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not interested. Like, what the fuck? Like, we had this, right? This is the only good price action we had, and that was based on an ETH future ETF, which is the most bearish thing I've ever heard of. And then we had this bleed out. And it never ends. Like, look, you can zoom out, and you can zoom out, and you can zoom out. It never ends. It's just been bleed. And now it's accelerating. Now, obviously, could be the bottom. For all I know, it's at weekly support. But I'm not in the business of buying stuff that looks like shit. Unless it's actually completely capitulating. And this is not, right? It's not like ETH is down like 90%. This is down 34% against Bitcoin. If it's down 80% against Bitcoin, I mean, I'd be talking very differently. Like, I mean, at that point, like, fuck yeah. Obviously, not expecting 80%. That would take it, like, almost to the lows where it was. I'm not expecting that, right? But people are acting like it's down 80%, and it's such a sure buy. And I'm just kind of like, this down 30%. The last bear market, this went down 90%. So that's just not me. But isn't that what ETH always does before ripping suddenly and leaving everyone behind? I mean, that's what ETH, like the thing is, what people, in my opinion, like don't understand is that this is high, right? Like we're trading at relative high levels. So basically this has room to, like the flippening is basically on the chart. Like when we're trading down here and you're like, oh yeah, flippening, whatever. Like that's an astronomical level, like an astronomical number, right? It has to like 10x against Bitcoin and then some. Now it barely has to do anything. So on relative terms, ETH is expensive in comparison to how it used to be. So it's going to trade differently. So like at these kind of price points, I'm not expecting a candle like we did get here down here, right? Like I'm not expecting a candle of like 50% in a week. It's just not like at these price points, not something that you get unless there's something massive coming out, which I'm not aware of. So I want to see ETH nuke more or to look stronger, right? Because let's look at it from the other side. Like let's say I'm wrong and this doesn't fully capitulate. It goes up with Bitcoin, whatever. Yeah, but then give me some strength. Do this, right? Do at least this. Let me buy the mid-range, right? Like, let me buy the mid-range resistance. I'm down. Like, roughly middle of the range, whatever. You get in there. You pump a little bit. You show me that you're still alive. I'm down. It's not like this. Like, these 18% are going to kill me if we're going to go for a flippening. Because that's going to be still like a 2x, 3x. Which is at least something, right? But I don't know. I'm not gonna greed for those 10% while the market, like while the altcoin market looks like shit, especially, right? And I'd be completely in the ETH team or like the altcoin team if it would actually make sense to me, right? But it doesn't. Like I don't really get the point of buying altcoins when you get a Bitcoin ETF. Like just on the face of it, like how stupid is that? Like you buy something that is not Bitcoin, that is traded against Bitcoin, when you have a fundamentally bullish kind of catalyst for Bitcoin. Now you could argue like, hey, yeah, but it's going to cause inflows, whatever, and then they're going to rotate into ETH. But I mean, then wait for those inflows, right? And they're going to rotate so you can rotate with them. Why do I need to rotate before they do and then get my teeth kicked in and then do it? Like, I just don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, this is a very, very non-retail market right now. Like, there's very few participants. And you need the participants first, and then maybe we can talk about, like, rotations into altcoins from, like, a bullish Bitcoin thing. The other way around, I don't get it. Makes no sense to me. If like there was a bunch of retail around, I'm down to play like 5D chess and play like 10 moves in advance, but I'm not seeing it. Like, it's pretty straightforward market. I wanna see the boomers buy my Bitcoin, and then I can sell my Bitcoin to them at some point, and then then the Zoomers are gonna come in because they like to come in at those points. They realize that Bitcoin is way too expensive, and then they buy their altcoins. Down with that. Just not now. Do you think entering a Bitcoin buy right now is worth it, or should we wait for pullback to support? I don't know. Like, people always ask me this after we had a pullback to support. Like, I'm not a breakout trader. I hate breakout trading. I hate it with a passion. So what you're doing right now is, if you buy now, you're breakout trading. So you're asking someone that hates it and doesn't really do it whether you should or not, which I wish I could help you. Could be a good position. But you're asking someone that really doesn't do this kind of trading. And if it pulls back, like, that's the worst of it, right? Like, if this pulls back to support, I probably wouldn't want it anymore. Like, if this pulls back down to 27.5, there's a good chance that I'll actually sell any bounce. So you'll buy and I'll sell. So, like, I hate, this is why I hate these kind of situations, because, like, if I don't have a position, because if it pulls back, I wouldn't want to have a position. And if it runs, I probably won't get a position, because how the fuck do you get filled if it runs? It's just, so the answer to that is, I don't know. I'm not good at breakout trading. I'm sorry. That's why I buy support, or usually try to buy support. Hey Don, I miss you on Twitter. Thank you for everything you do. You have really helped me out substantially in my trading journey. Love to hear it, man. Happy to help, especially if it's like you learning something, because the whole, like, I'm copy trading someone, I mean, that's been going quite well, I think, for quite a few people, because I've just been doing well. But that's not gonna go well forever, and at some point, like, there's just not gonna be me holding everyone's hands. Or I'm just going to have a massive losing streak, right? And I can take 10, 15, 20 losses in a row. I don't think a lot of people that copy trade other people can. So, yeah. So far, so good. But I'm always happy when I hear that people learned, instead of like, oh, yeah, I copy traded you and make a bunch of money. Like, that's not really, like, cool, good for you, but that's not really what this is supposed to be. But, yeah. There you go. I think that's the lay of the land. The altcoins have been getting shit on as expected. This is quite nice. This is playing out exactly how I wanted it to. Bitcoin dominance just going absolutely ballistic, back to levels that are quite insane to me, 50% plus, especially given this metric is basically skewed in the way that Bitcoin dominance should go lower and lower and lower, because you have more and more projects and you have stable coins and all that kind of stuff. Nope, it's going up, which is quite nice, because one, means that there's not a lot of froth in the market. Like, altcoins going up is generally frothy. Altcoins have not been going up. The market has been going up. That's great news, right? Bitcoin dominance making new highs as Bitcoin is up almost to 2x. That's great. Like, you still don't have froth. Which is good, right? And then you also have a lot, like, the higher it goes, especially if you're not sitting in altcoins yet, the more potential in altcoins you have, because there's always going to be an iron ceiling for altcoins, and that is basically Bitcoin. So you're never going to have an altcoin that's going to like go above the market cap of Bitcoin long term. It might do so short term. We've had that before. XRP fully diluted basically approached Bitcoin's market cap back in 2018. But that's not gonna, in my opinion anyway, that's not gonna sustain, right? So there's always an iron ceiling, and I think ETH, for example, is another one of those. Like if you approach ETH market cap, probably not gonna get above it for long. So the lower your altcoins go, right? Like if Bitcoin has like, if Bitcoin is the ceiling here, and then you have ETH, and it's trading here, do you really want to take the trade in between? No, you don't. But if Bitcoin is trading here and then ETH is like did this and it's dumping, at some point it gets much more interesting, right? Like let's say it's down 60, 70, 80% against Bitcoin, and it's quite a bit away from that iron ceiling, then it becomes more and more interesting. So that's good for multiple reasons. One, no froth. Two, you have more opportunities down the line, especially if they keep on dumping. And yeah, three, in general, like whenever you get altcoin weakness, people start rotating out of their altcoins, and that might actually lead to Bitcoin strength, right? Like people selling their altcoins, buying Bitcoin. That's a relatively good thing for the market. People saying this is best RR you will get might be saying that because they want other people to buy because they are 100% 100x long. I don't know. I don't mind the 28k long. Like I'm not a hater. Look at this. You have like 28k. This was the breakout level, right? It's not the worst. Like it's a breakout trade, but I fucking hate breakout trading. So take it with a grain of salt. You can even go back further. I don't dislike it. So, and I don't think any of the liquidity that is in the chat really matters in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I mean, I just bought. I sold, I bought, I bought, I sold, I bought, I sold. Like this has actually been quite a nice move, right? Like I bought, I sold, I bought, I sold somewhere here, didn't sell the top. And then I bought here, sold up here, didn't sell the top either. I think I got pretty close here, but I don't remember. And then it went down. I bought here, I sold here. Pretty much 27.4, and then I rebought into the spike, and then got wrecked for a bit, but not really. Like people were like, "Oh, you're so fucked," and I'm like, "Dude, like, I'm down 3%. I don't get what the fuck you're talking about." Like I just took this market from 16k to 30k. Had a bunch of good trades in between. I'm up like on that trade alone. It's like up 90%, and then people are like, "Oh, you're fucking wrecked on 3%." I'm like, I don't know how the fuck people trade. How can you even get wrecked on a 3% move? Like that's something that I just don't understand, but apparently possible. You have to go to ridiculous lengths to get fucked on that, and yeah, is what it is. People don't even understand that I don't trade leverage, but yeah. So you think it's a head and shoulders? No, I don't think so. But yeah, there's a bunch of like altcoins that look better. Solana is one of them. But I still think, and this is the main reason why I'm not holding any, that if Bitcoin actually plays like I want it to, as in if Bitcoin shows strength because an ETF thing is coming, the altcoins are going to do poorer in comparison. So there's a few that look better than others. Solana is one of them. I talked about a bunch of them on other streams. I'm not going to go over all of them. But like this Slido, for example. You're not having any fun holding that while Bitcoin is up quite a bit. So and that's one of the more liked ones. So I'm staying away from altcoins until further notice, not necessarily because I just dislike them, but because I just don't see the point. I think it's a Bitcoin market right now, and it should continue that way for a little bit. So Bitcoin Cash seems to pump, and Bitcoin pumps too. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like it. It's one of the few altcoins that I like, but it's still an altcoin. So, but yeah, hope that made sense. Appreciate you guys coming by. I'm gonna go get some food. I'm starving. Big shout out to Woo for sponsoring. Check out the exchange by clicking the links in the description if you want to. If not, also cool. Yeah, thanks for coming by. Appreciate it. I might do like a weekend stream because we missed one last week, and I feel a bit bad about skipping all this stuff. Someone also asked earlier about weekly open. The reason why that's not been happening is because I'm not even showing up to my own stuff. So it just makes no sense. So that's on hiatus / cancelled for now. So until better times in the market or in general. I mean, my life is getting a little bit more busy these days. The little one demands a little bit more attention right now. So, but yeah, thanks for coming by. Appreciate you guys. Hope you have a nice rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Bye bye.